Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna in the highest. Please be seated.
If I asked you how many things you think you could focus on at the same time, how many things do you think you could successfully focus on? 12? That's a high number. That's being a mom. Okay, that's true. I will never experience that, so maybe, you know what, I won't touch that. Maybe moms can, I believe that. How many things? Neurologically speaking, they say you can only focus on 2 to 3 things at most at the same time. Like really be focused on, right? Like you can do things with muscle memory without thinking about it, but to focus on something, at most 2 to 3 things. And we see this with kind of like magicians that are kind of doing like sleight of hands or misdirection, where, hey, look at this over here, and you don't notice the things I'm pulling out of my sleeve, right? Or pickpockets work this way, right? I'm gonna bump into you, and then you don't notice that I'm taking your wallet and your watch and your keys and all your stuff, right? And you'll see, like, you can look up videos of like really good magicians who misdirect a whole audience that they're messing with some guy up on stage, and everybody's focusing on all the things that he's taking off this guy. The guy obviously can't even figure out what he's taking, but he's got his watch and all this stuff. But then all at the same time, he's like, the magician has like changed his tie he's wearing, or his shirt. And the whole audience didn't even see that because they're so focused over here, right? And there's those like videos where you put like a rock under a cup or something and be like, which hat is the baseball under, right? And there are videos, I showed this at teen camp, and I had all the kids basically say, okay, pay attention to which cup has the rock under it, right? And they had 9 cups, and there are 3 different colors of cups, and they're just following the one cup, right? And during the video, most of the students were able to follow the rock, but they didn't notice that all the cups changed colors. Or that there were like 3 extra hands that came in the middle of the video. They didn't see any of that, even though it was happening right in front of them, right? Because they were focused on something else. And it's actually an amazing ability of our brains to be able to filter out unneeded information. If I was not able to just tune stuff out, it would be debilitating. I wouldn't be able to drive a car. Because I would be sensory overload, right, of all the noises and sounds and where my foot is on the gas pedal and then what the radio is saying and then where my hands are and what's that light on the dashboard and then, oh yeah, there's something coming down the road, right? It's an amazing ability of our brains to be able to filter out this stuff and focus on what's really important, what we really need to be focused on in that moment. But it can also work against us, right? Where I miss stuff completely. Right, David was talking about the buzz, right? And introverts fall into this quicker than extroverts, right? But eventually we'll all fall into the fallacy of just going through the motions and not really paying attention or listening to what is being said in the conversation. Because I'm either eavesdropping on a more interesting conversation or thinking about what I have coming up the rest of that night or whatever. And I can get distracted really easily. Jesus knew this about us. After all, he did make us this way, right? But he describes us as a certain animal that is not exactly flattering. And it's in John chapter 10. And so go ahead and go there. If you have a Bible, I encourage you. John chapter 10. We're going to start verse 1. It's not on the screen for you, so if you want to double check my work, you're going to have to do it yourself. John chapter 10, verse 1. This is what Jesus says in John chapter 10. Listen to this. Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. So of all the animals that our Creator and loving God decides to compare us to, who does he compare us to? Sheep. Now, I mean, I'm not around sheep like ever, right? I don't know about you. I don't know if you have a flock of sheep here in the South Bay somewhere, you know, grazing in your backyard. But I'm willing to bet most of us aren't around livestock that much. I'm not around sheep hardly ever. But I think we all know sheep are not the most intelligent creatures in the animal kingdom, right? Sheep are dumb. They are. You can go online and find some really funny videos of sheep being sheep. There are videos of sheep trying to exit a barn through a doorway. And they literally, it's like a Three Stooges movie. They're going through the door and they get stuck because there's like too many sheep, but they can't process the fact that they can't move forward because they're stuck. And so they just continue to like barge, and they don't realize like, I need to take a step back and then I can go. There are videos of sheep trying to like jump across like 30-foot rivers. And they believe they can make it, right? They're like, I am like super sheep. And they just jump and, like, sheep are dumb. Sheep are stupid. And Jesus comes and he says, hey, guess what? You are all sheep. Right? You're all sheep. You get so distracted that you can only focus on one or two things at a time. And it's like, we're sheep. And me and Caitlin got to go to New Zealand last year during my sabbatical. And I didn't know this about New Zealand until we showed up. But there are 4 million people in the country of New Zealand. 4 million New Zealanders, okay, on the North and South Island. There are 40 million sheep in New Zealand. Sheep is one of their like biggest exports, lamb and like wool. So there's legitimately 10 times as many sheep as people in New Zealand. And if you don't know much about New Zealand, I didn't know much about New Zealand. We were going there for 2 weeks and we were doing like basically a 2-week road trip. They drive on the other side of the road down there. And so I was really nervous about driving a camper van for 2 weeks, which is a stick shift, and I'm going to be on the wrong side of the car with a stick shift on the other side, on the wrong side of the road, right? I'm like, I cannot focus on that many things going through intersections backwards, right? Like, so I was really nervous, so I got online and like went to the New Zealand DMV, their equivalent of DMV, and like took driving tests and stuff to try and get familiar with their signs and like get familiar with like mirrored intersections, like a left-hand turn is okay on red, but a right hand I have to like, it was trippy. But they have a section, this is no joke, you can go to New Zealand's Department of Transportation website. They have an entire section on their driver's test. Does that mean? No. They have an entire section on their driver's test that has to deal with how you handle driving with sheep in the road. Because it happens so often because there's so many dang sheep, right? So they have an entire section of what to do if you come across a roadway and it's like covered in sheep, right? And how to avoid that, or how to avoid killing sheep, or what you are liable for in an accident with a sheep, right? Like all of that stuff. And so I was prepared, right? We got down there and it was a great trip. We didn't run into any sheep on the roadway for like the first 13 days we were there. It felt like we saw all 40 million sheep, but none of them were on the road until the very last morning. The very last morning, we're going to the airport, and I'm driving down this like mountain road, and it's early in the morning, it's like 6 in the morning because we're flying home. And so I come around this corner, And all of a sudden there are like 500 sheep just in the road. And so it was kind of a blank quarter, so I slammed on the brakes, and my approach was so sudden that all the sheep were spooked. And so they had, at that point we're walking, but then they just all stopped, right? And they were all just staring at me. And it's 6 in the morning, it's foggy, and I'm like, oh shoot, we're gonna be late for our flight, because I don't know how I'm gonna get through 500 of these sheep that I've just stunned into paralyzation, right? And so I sat there for a second trying to go I hope there's a shepherd somewhere here, right? But sheep are dumb. Normal animals, when they see a car coming, unless it's a deer in the headlights, right? They get off the road, right? But sheep are stupid enough to be ugh, I'm just gonna stand here and let you hit me, right? I don't know how sheep survive in the wild. You ever thought of that? How do sheep survive in the wild? How did sheep, this is the question I think I'm gonna ask God first when I get to heaven. It's how did sheep outlive the dodo bird, right? Sheep don't have fangs, they don't have claws, they're not agile, they're not fast, they're big and white, so they stick out in a forest, right? Sheep without a shepherd are useless. They're useless. But luckily, that New Zealand morning, as I sat there, a shepherd kind of came out of the fog. Because he was like, why did my sheep stop, right? Oh, there's this silly tourist that shocked them, right? So he was there he had a dog and a ranch hand. And so they started herding these sheep off the road. And I scared them so badly that they had to actually kind of push some of them to get them going, right? But they started moving, and these shepherds very astutely just herded them right off into this little pen that they were eventually trying to get to anyways. And 500 sheep all of a sudden just fluidly went off. And I kind of waved at the shepherd, and he's like, yeah, it's all right, it happens, you know. And we made our flight, and everything was good. Thank God there was a shepherd with those sheep. Sheep are useless without a shepherd. But you get sheep with a shepherd, you can see this on videos online too, where all of a sudden sheep seem like they are extremely intelligent. They're better than Olympic synchronized swimmers when they've got a shepherd calling them. Right? It doesn't matter how far away those sheep are. There's a video online where there's this guy, I don't know, in New Zealand or somewhere, and all you see is just fog, and it's up into these mountains, and you see no sheep. And he just stands there, and he just starts calling them. And then you just slowly see these dots coming down, half a mile away, and these sheep just hear, and they come, and it's just, or you see them herding them, and it's like a flock of birds or something that just flow together, or a school of fish that they're so synchronized and in touch and in tune, and they know exactly where to go and what to do when they got a shepherd involved. I don't think it's any accident that Jesus chooses to use sheep to describe us. Because I think there's no other animal in this world that more accurately portrays me than a sheep. And he comes and he says, man, you're a sheep. And when you're with me, you're intelligent. And you can do some pretty amazing things. But if you wander off and you try to fend for yourself, it gets really silly really quick. And back then, in this culture, they wouldn't have enough money or land to have their own pens for each separate flock or each separate farmer. And so several farmers around in the same area would put all their cattle in the same pen at night. And so all the cattle would be mixed together. My sheep would be with your sheep and our neighbor's sheep and the other sheep, and there'd be 5 or 6 flocks together in the same pen. And the only way that they sort out the sheep is because they trust that their sheep know whose shepherd's voice they belong to. And so Jesus uses this language of he comes to the pen and he calls out his own sheep. And they follow him because they know their shepherd's voice. But if his sheep don't know his shepherd's voice, they're not coming out of the pen and they're getting left behind. Sheep with a shepherd are marvelous. They're mind-blowing. And he uses this to describe you and me. Because me as a sheep, man, I get distracted. I'm not very much good without my good shepherd. And I can get led astray pretty easily. And like sheep, there are things out in the wilderness that would love to pick me off. They would love to get me separated from my shepherd, because then I'm really vulnerable. And it's not even always evil things that want to separate me. Sometimes I separate myself. And I actually think that this is the biggest hurdle for me to overcome as a sheep, is not getting separated from the flock of my own accord. Because if I'm a sheep, Jesus comes and he says, you need to be focused on me as your good shepherd. And I go, okay, cool. I'll be focused on you as my good shepherd. But I also need to be focused on my bills, finances, how much is in my bank account. So I'll focus on you, God, and my bank account. Oh, and my job. I can't pay the bills or fill my bank account without my career. So I'll be focused on you, God, and my bills and my career. And I should focus on my kids, right? I should spend time with my wife, right? Okay, so you got bills, job, and kids. Oh, and you know, there are just things that are scary out there, right? So I gotta get insurance. I gotta be afraid of some of these things. So I gotta focus on this stuff. And you know what, God, I really like playing fantasy football. So I gotta win fantasy football. And we start putting this list together of things that are drawing our attention. And they're not bad things. Okay? Spending time with family is an important thing. Football, I don't think is bad. If you ask my wife, she thinks it's horrible and evil. I don't know why. I love football. Football's not bad. Finances aren't bad. If you're in school, you should focus on school and getting good grades and doing your homework. But the problem is I forget in the midst of all that I am a sheep. And I can focus on maybe 2 or 3 things at most. And when I look at the list of things that I'm focused on, they're filled with good things. But before I know it, God's not even on that list. Here's a question for you. A typical weekday, okay, whether you're going to school, if you're a student, if you're an adult, going to work, if you're retired, going to play golf, I don't know. Typical weekday, you get up in the morning, what are the first things that are on your mind? Most of the time, it's what I have coming up that day, what I'm going to eat for breakfast, maybe something that happened yesterday, worried about I got to pay rent in a week, or my car's still not running quite right. There's a lot of things on my mind when I get up in the morning. Is God in the top 10 on a typical weekday morning? I've got homework, I've got tests, I've got a meeting, I've got a project, I've got a deadline. Is God in the top 10? Is God in the top 5? Is God in the top 3? Or does he get dropped down the list? Where all of a sudden, I'll go all week long, and I won't really intentionally think about God. or intentionally try and listen to what God might be telling me to do, or intentionally try and draw closer to God with some time spent with Him. And before I know it, me as a sheep, I am separated from my shepherd. And it wasn't even evil things that pulled me away. It was good things. But I think Satan wants to fill my life with so many good things that I get separated from the best thing. And then all of a sudden, as a sheep, I end up in a dry, desert, scary place. And I don't know where my shepherd is, and I don't know how I got there. It's because I wasn't focused on listening to a shepherd. You showed up here this morning. What were the first things on your mind, the top of your list that you were focused on coming in here? Was it, where are you going to park? When you were walking through that door an hour ago, what was on your top of your mind? Was it, oh, I got to talk to this person. What am I going to eat after? Oh, there's a football game going on right now. I hope I recorded it. How long is the stupid sermon going to go, right? What's on the top of your mind? Does God crack the top 3 when you're coming to church? Or are we as sheep so focused on other things that we don't even realize we're not listening to our good shepherd? Because I can only focus on so many things at a time. I only have so much bandwidth to work with. And if I'm not intentionally, as a sheep, every single day, trying to put God as close to the top of that list as I possibly can, He's going to be off the list before I know it. And it's not with bad things, it's with good things. Because I haven't even touched technology yet. Oh yeah, that little thing that's in your pocket right now? Yeah. At camp, we take students' cell phones away. And it's like the cruelest thing we do. And yet the kids understand on one level, if you ask me to sit down with a quiet time booklet and scripture and you let me have my cell phone in my pocket, there is no way I'm doing quiet time. Are cell phones evil? No. Cell phones are amazing inventions. They have saved lives. They've done incredible things. I have nothing against cell phones. The problem is, man, my cell phone hijacks my focus so often. And it's not just with God, it's at work, it's with school, it's in church, it's when I'm sitting across the table from my wife. Cell phones are not evil, and yet they lead me away from my good shepherd. And not just cell phones, right? These days you've got a bajillion TV shows you could be watching, right? Netflix has their own shows that you can only watch on Netflix, but then Amazon Prime also has their own shows that you can only watch on Amazon Prime. And then you got Hulu, and you got YouTube TV, and you got regular cable, and then you got sports, and then TV. Or is TV bad? No. It can be unhealthy. TV is not evil. But if I spend more time watching Netflix than listening to my good shepherd, I'm in trouble. And if I'm honest, I spend a lot more time every week watching Netflix than I do listening to my good shepherd. And you put in movies. And you put in internet, social media. On top of any other like actual real life hobbies you have, right? Like surfing or whatever it is. And you see how the list gets pretty full of things that are vying for my attention in this world. And those are things that I choose to listen to. I also get things shoved down my throat all day long, right? With advertisements and people telling me I should be worried about this and focus on this and doing this and blah, 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 blah. Can you see how we get lost real quick without even knowing it? Why? Because I'm a dumb sheep. And I'm not listening to my shepherd's voice. This is not a guilt trip. This is a wake-up call. I need to realize that too often I go through my day and God is not in the top 10 things that I am focused on, that I am spending time on, that I am actually worrying about. And I'm so focused on good things that I lose sight of my good shepherd. And I'm out of earshot from my good shepherd before I know it. And then we sit here in a series like How to Listen to God, and I'm like, that's impossible. God doesn't talk. God doesn't speak to me. The good shepherd is a lie because he's nowhere. And Jesus comes and he says, if you would just pay attention to me, even half the amount that you watch Netflix, you would start to hear my voice. We as sheep have to be paying attention to what is drawing our attention. Because it's not evil things that are going to pull us away from God. It's just a bunch of distractions that Satan loves to use in our culture to just distract, pull us away, inch by inch, until I get to a place where, man, I haven't heard from God in months. I haven't gotten anything out of church in years. I'm starting to lose a reason for even doing any of this anymore. It's because I'm focused on the wrong stuff. And we see this in Scripture and over where people are just distracted with the wrong things. The beautiful thing is, man, when I listen to my good shepherd, he does amazing things with me that I didn't think were possible. Because I'm listening to my good shepherd's voice. And all of a sudden, when I start focusing on him above the other stuff, then all of a sudden, the other stuff starts to take care of itself. Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I shall not worry about the other stuff that should be worried about. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me on paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. Why? Because I got my good shepherd with me. Matthew 6:33, Jesus says, look, seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, and what? Everything else will be taken care of. Don't get distracted by the other things in this world that are not evil things. They're good things. You should spend time with them, but don't spend time with them first. Spend time listening to me first, and I will show you how to take care of the rest of the stuff. I will take care of the rest of the stuff in ways you don't even understand. Free up your bandwidth to not worry about anything else but listening to God. If I focus on listening to God, and that's all I focus on all day long, guess what? The bills are going to get paid. If I listen to God first and foremost and just spend time focusing on that, guess what? My family's going to be healthy. I'm going to have an amazing relationship with friends and family. And my career is going to be fine. It's going to go well. If I just simply, as a sheep, listen to my good shepherd. We've got to buy into that truth. We have to actually believe that in our bones. That if I truly spend my days just simply trying to focus and listen on this good shepherd's voice, then I will find the sweetest life I have ever tasted. But we as sheep get distracted. And we get pulled away. We can look at Luke chapter 10. Because it's a scene that gets at the heart of this. Luke chapter 10, we're going to start in verse 38. It's really short, and you've heard this before, but it cuts to the quick of what this is all about. Luke 10, verse 38. It's in the home of Mary and Martha. You've heard this scene before. But listen to this, verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. It's a logical plea, right? What does Jesus say? Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things. But few things are needed. In fact, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Martha had valid concerns. She had a rabbi with his 12 men staying in her home. She had to feed them. She had to make sure the rooms were ready. She had to probably clean up a bit. And her deadbeat sister is just hanging out with them. And so she comes justified in our eyes and saying, hey, she's slacking off. I'm doing all the work. Can't you tell her? Her list was long of things that she was focused on. And Jesus comes and he says, it's not bad stuff, but it's not the best. She's focused on the best, and I'm not going to make her lose her focus. May we be sheep that get in trouble for paying too much attention to our Good Shepherd. May I pray that my life, I can be accused of spending too much time trying to listen to the voice of God. I hope people accuse you of neglecting your responsibilities because you are spending too much time with that Christianity stuff. Because when we put God at the top of the list, which is another way of saying when we love God and love our neighbors first, always, above everything else, before anything else, we become sheep with the Good Shepherd. And we start hearing our Good Shepherd's voice. And he starts moving and working in ways that is life-giving and brings kingdom not only to us, but to the people around us. But we as sheep have to wake up and realize I'm focused on the wrong stuff most of the time. It's not bad stuff, but it's not the best. Let's focus on the best stuff. Let's focus on the Good Shepherd's voice, because that is only when I, as a sheep, can really start to live the life that I'm hungering for. That's the only time that I can really understand what the kingdom is all about. And I start to hear God's voice every day. So let's be sheep that listen to the Good Shepherd.